if you have any questions about anything, any particular point of anything at all, be it more creative stuff or be it more technical stuff, I'm happy to answer all your questions. So, this guy with the cap. Why did I move to Holland? It was more of a business decision, to be honest. I liked making music my way, hardstyle. So I moved to Holland because this is the home of this music. It all came together. There's more bookings that I can get from here. It's really well located for bookings in Italy or in Sweden or whatever. It's a really short flight over to the United States. It makes it a lot easier because in Australia, we're a 24-hour flight away, and that from here, and about a 16-hour flight away from anywhere. So the scene isn't so big. You don't have access to as much stuff. Yeah. Oh, absolutely, it's a beautiful country. Yeah, I know. And the weather's a lot better, but it's one of those things. Yeah, some people decide that, when it comes to being a professional musician, you've got to think of things in a couple of ways. Because obviously we are people, so you've got to decide, do I want to be with what I know and my family and all my other influences, my other sphere of stuff? Yeah, okay, sure. That can be more important. For example, Techno Boy never wants to move out of where he lives, even though he would get more bookings if he was here. I'm not talking about his sound, I'm just talking about booking possibilities, because it's a lot easier to book somebody that's going to, rock up after about an hour's drive, and you don't have to worry about flights and a hotel and so on and so forth. Other people feel that their lifestyle is more important, and they want to stay where they're from. And that's why I moved. I thought it would be a better idea to be able to maximize the potential for my bookings and for my music. Yeah, no problem. Any other questions? All right, to the gentleman with the yellow shirt. I will give you a microphone.
The website you mentioned where everything was remixed,
yeah.
You can see that. Is it comparable to Who Sampled?
No, because everything is a remix website. It's more of a documentary, where Who Sampled it just kind of is a database of samples. So I think they kind of used each other, to be honest. Where the guys building the documentary sort of went through and pulled out some cool examples.
Oh, okay.
But I think it's important to watch Everything is a Remix to see that it's okay to do these things and to sample and steal and so on and so forth. Yeah, because when you see it presented in the way that it's presented, you're like, oh, well, cool.
Yeah.
I have more freedom, and I think that's important when you're being a musician.
Yeah. Thanks.
No problem. Any other questions? The gentleman with the villain cap. Or the gentleman with the Vans cap. I like that cap.
Yeah. Why you leaving Scantrax for Dirty Works?
The main reason... The main reason was more of a creative thing. There are always like internal issues and stuff like that, but the main reason why I decided to move from one record label to another was mainly because I felt that I could do more creatively with my music with Dirty Works than I could with Scantrax. And spending a lot of time with Dov and everything, he had a particular vision for where he wanted me to go. I'll never forget this actually. We were working on a track and he's like, Sam, I want you to be the new Headhunters. And I was kind of like, okay, but I don't make music that way. And I'm not going to try and make music that way. I did try, and it never worked for me because I felt like I was forcing myself and forcing my music to be something that it wasn't. But that's okay. So I was like, well, you know what, maybe I'm better off somewhere else. I'm going to try these guys, see how open-minded they are when it comes to my music. And that's why.
But you don't like the Prophet? Or
No, actually, I respect him quite a bit. No, he gave me a call the other day, actually. It was kind of, hey, Sam, we want you back at Scantrax. And I was like, are you sure about this, Top? Have you listened to my music recently? We've gone from, trap raw style to kind of subground and then to kick and bass. Are you sure this is what you want? Ultimately, it was, it's got nothing to do with him. I actually respect him quite a bit as a person because he's a really cool dude, really chilled out, kind of cool dude. So it's got nothing to do with personal stuff. It's just more creative.
Okay.
Cool, no problem. Anyone else? The gentleman with the cap.
You were working with Corey, known as Scope Black, for a while as Bioweapon.
Yeah.
What's the exact reason for the splitting? Because you're getting a bit out of the box more than Corey.
Yeah, I guess it was part of that. I mean, I've always been a producer that has thought of many genres in many styles in many ways. Something that that like we didn't really see eye to eye in, and there were a couple of other personal things in it as well. Just kind of like when we moved over from Australia to the Netherlands, we're in each other's faces 24/7, and that's kind of the worst thing that you can do, to be able to live with the person that you work with, because you're kind of working all the time, and then the personal stuff gets in and around with work, and it's kind of like, So it created a lot of friction, and in amongst all that, you know, and when you're in a duo, you have your own stuff anyway, before you're already too tight. So it's kind of like, you know, personal stuff just got in the way, and yeah, it just, yeah. Whatever happened, happened, I guess.
And you're also gonna collab maybe later with him?
Well, I've got 2 tracks in the works with him, so yeah.
Oh, thank you.
So it's something we thought would be unexpected, and yeah, another gentleman with a cap.
Can you tell something about your experience on performing on Climax last year?
Oh,
Maybe
sure.
a good story.
Well, okay, I'll be really honest with you. Before Climax, I was doing a big North American tour. Every second weekend, I was going over to Canada and the United States. So I was getting really tired from touring, because I'm a studio junkie. I love being in the studio, and making music is not just a business thing. It's not I do it because you know, I need more tracks out there. I do it because it's my therapy. And without making music, I get really, really aggro. Now, what has this got to do with Climax? Now, in amongst all the travel, I wasn't in the studio. And so I was like, oh, man. And then Climax comes along, and I'm like, actually, honestly, even on the way to driving, I was like, if they canceled me, I don't care, because I want to go to the studio. That's how I was feeling. But I got to the stage. I started hearing the people, the chanting, the roar. Every time the lights, you know, dimmed and glowed and everything, I was like, holy crap, man, this is crazy. I got off the stage and I was like, this is incredible, absolutely incredible. It was an adrenaline rush from start to finish, to be honest with you. I didn't know what to expect. You know, obviously, I was in this state of mind beforehand, going like, screw it. But when I got off that stage, absolutely electrifying. The roar of the crowd every time a kick or kick and bass dropped, incredible. When the music stopped, they roared again. It was just completely bonkers. And I want to do it again. It's addictive. It's like a drug. It's really, really, really incredible. So, yeah, I mean, as a DJ, you have those gigs where it might be a small crowd, but it's really, really rocking. It's like that times 10,000 with this huge sea of people going completely bonkers to what you're doing. Crazy, absolutely crazy experience. Cool. Anyone else? Yo. Feel free to ask technical questions. I don't mind.
Thanks. Hi, Sam.
Hi.
I went to Pintago last year, and I saw your workshop there.
Yeah, on kick drums.
Yeah. That's true. And it worked for me. So I had a new kick drum I made.
Okay.
And the question was for me: do you like to work on your own, or rather with someone else, like a collab?
I actually prefer working on my own because I like my own space. It's one of those things, you know, I just kind of, I like having this sort of just freedom to do whatever I want without anyone kind of on my shoulder. Even if it's people watching, actually, sometimes I get a little bit like, I don't like it. It's just, When people are watching 24/7, someone's got a camera on you all the time, you kind of feel like, all right, feels like this. Because of that, I don't like collaborating all that much. And when I do collaborate with people, it's not just because I think it's a good idea for 2 names to be together, or I like his sound and I like this. Not at all. It's because we connect on a personal level, and then we work on stuff. And that's more important for me, rather than just, you know, okay, this person, that person, all that sort of thing. So I'm very selective when it comes to collaborating. I mean, a couple of weeks ago...
Because you like to work with Techno Boy and Tune Boy?
Yeah, I like them because we're good friends, you know, and that sort of thing.
Three empty heads?
Exactly, we're 3 empty heads that are kind of just, you know, I think actually every time we've come into the studio, there's been a few days, we're kind of like, oh man, empty head. But we connect like that as people, and then that's why, you know, I like to work with them. But often when I'm, in my studio and like I'll jump between tracks in a couple of hours. So like, okay, I'm working on something. It's drum and bass. Oh, but this little sound here could really work in this other track. So I'll take it out and then go into the other track, and then Cubase crashes. But they'll keep on going into the other track and then keep on working and all that sort of thing. You can't do that when there's somebody else there, because there's more of an expectation to really focus on what you're doing, to maximize the time that you have together. So that can be a bit of a strange pressure it works in some places, it doesn't work in others, and that's why I prefer to stick to solo productions. Cool. Thank you. Anyone else? Sure.
Hi Sam, I have a technical question for you.
Sure.
You said in your Kick masterclass, I saw it on YouTube,
Yep.
that you use clip distortion from Logic.
Yep.
Have you already found an alternative to it? Because you like to try different things, and maybe you found if you always use the same distortion, your kicks kind of...
I don't think that they always sound the same if you try different things, because clip distortion is actually quite a small part of distorting a kick drum. And I'll use maybe one or two of them when working on a kick, and the rest is more just clever EQing and then using like a straight clipping distortion, not necessarily the clip distortion, but a clipping, hard clipping style distortion. So the other thing is, I think about it like this: if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So I can get good results using that way, and for me it's more important to be able to create things quickly and get them sounding good quickly, so that way it can be more in the flow when it comes to other things. So I haven't really looked for anything, mainly because, yeah, it works for me, so why?
All right.
Cool. Gentleman in the green shirt.
Yes, I have a question about tracks, because
Sure.
can you tell us how do you prevent your tracks from being muddy?
Okay. That's, first off, number one rule about when it comes to working on mixdowns is make sure that your monitoring is good. If you can't hear what you're doing accurately and properly, it becomes a lot harder. Now, I've moved from working in a bedroom, so the audio session album that I worked on was in a bedroom type space, and I moved to a more professional quality studio with more expensive monitors that I could hear everything what I was doing. With that means I could hear where I'm supposed to be cutting and boosting things to try and avoid the problems of having a really muddy mix. Some things to take note of. So it's really hard, because that's a really ambiguous thing. Make sure you can hear well. What is more important is, what is just as important is, don't go overdoing things with like delay type effects, so a lot of reverb or delay. Avoid things like that. Avoid particular regions where, like in the frequency spectrum, where things can build up a little bit too much. And the other thing, this is more of an ethos thing. When you're working on a mixdown, what is really important is that everything has its own area. Separation is a good thing, actually, when working in a mix.
In the spectrum, you mean?
Well, yeah, it's just in its own space. So you can have a couple of sounds right here dead in the center, but if you've got the same, takes up the same frequency space, but they're panned left and right, or left and or right, or they go in between, that's got space in as well. So if you're thinking that everything needs its kind of own space and it needs to be separated, that can help you clean up a mix. But don't overdo it too much on the reverb. It's very addictive. Reverb is really, really one of those things you're kind of like, oh, let's put it everywhere because it makes everything sound huge. But the problem is that it makes everything sound a bit too huge. So you've got to be really careful in it. And yeah, so that's one of the tips, I guess. Don't overdo it a little bit too much, and make sure that everything is kind of separated, because when you've got a separated mix, that means you've got like a clean mix.
Okay, so this is also the way to make your sounds really full and big?
Also, like, layering is one way, so like a lot of stuff on the frequency spectrum that is beefed up a little bit. But what I mean by separating stuff is separating different stuff, so that like, your kick isn't too reverby because the reverbs are too reverb, and then it gets, stuff like that, it's going to make a mess. Separating things out like that, so you've got like a really dry kick or really wet set of leads, or the other way around, really wet kick and really dry set of leads. Stuff like that, having things separated out like that will help you clean up a mix. Cool. No problem. Anyone? Yeah. Sure, no problem.
What do you think of headends nowadays?
Didn't you ask this question yesterday? Stop. Well, I guess in a word, it takes, well, in a short phrase, it takes balls to do what he's doing, without question. Not all of what he's doing is my flavor, but I respect a lot of it, and I think some of it is really quite cool. Actually, what I feel is that his music now feels like, to me, what it used to be like 7 years ago. It feels like he's found himself again. Now, okay, a lot of people are going to say, yeah, but he's making slow music, so, you know, he can get the bigger bookings, get more money, and all that sort of thing. That's not always a bad thing, but the other thing is that wasn't his motivation either. That was never his motivation. When we were working on the track together, Breakout, he was already going through this kind of process like, I don't know if I'm feeling hardstyle anymore. I don't get the same thing out of it. It's not what it used to be, or rather, I'm not, you know, how I feel about it anymore. I can't do another art creation. I can't do another, you know, whatever, you know, power of the mind. He can't do that anymore. And the reason, actually, why we were collaborating is because we were asked by Reverse to make something that was like his old stuff. And we tried and we tried and we tried, and we just weren't feeling it. So, in that process of just going through and listening to different kinds of music, you know, we were listening to a lot of big room stuff, and he's like, yeah, man, I could see it in his face. It wasn't one of those things where it's kind of like, yeah, well, the girls at Ultra are really hot, so I'm going to make that kind of music. It wasn't like that. No, it was kind of flicking through the tracks. Okay, we'll listen to some Jump, cool. Listen to hardstyle, yeah. Listen to some of the, at the time, new Showtech. Man, this is sick. When I saw the reaction on his face, I was like, man, he wants to do this because he feels it, he connects it. And that's so important when you're making music, that you feel it and collect, regardless of genre. When you have that kind of buzz, great. And so that's what he got, and that's why he made the change. So I think that he's following his heart. It takes balls, particularly when you are who he is, to be able to switch something like that. Now, you don't have to like it, nobody has to, and a lot of people are like, but, you know, his set at Legends was awesome. I miss all that old stuff. Why doesn't he do it anymore? Well, the fact of the matter is he doesn't connect with it anymore. And so, yeah. Like I said, not all of it is my flavor. That's partially because I go through genres like you wouldn't believe. 1 week it's one thing, 1 week it's another thing. This week it's really dark drum and bass, and next week it'll probably be deep house. I don't know. But you know, when it comes down to it, I respect him a lot for doing that. Yeah. Cool, no problem.
Yeah, I have a question. What do you think about the new tracks of Plutonium Boy?
To be honest, the last one that I heard from Plutonium Boy was Where Did I Go Wrong? And aside from all the hate that it got, it was damn catchy because everyone was singing it. Everyone was. Wasn't my favorite thing, but yeah. At the end of the day, I feel that Plutonium Boy should just reevaluate what he's doing so that he can get his quality up as much as possible and do the same thing of what I talked about beforehand. See, the problem is that it feels like what he's doing is kind of a not very refined imitation of what other people are doing. And he's tried to get the quality up there by sampling things here or there or whatever, but it's not there. And it feels like to me that even though he's a legend, it feels like he's a little bit tired and needs to reinvent himself. And he should spend time doing that. I don't know him as a person, and I really don't know that much about him, aside from, he was a legend from back in the day, and some of his tracks are actually pretty cool hardstyle tracks. But yeah, his new stuff at the moment, it doesn't float my boat. Anyone else?
I got another technical question for you, this
Sure.
time on leads.
Okay.
One of your best tracks, I think, is Lose Control 2.0.
Yeah. I think it's not so good.
Yeah, I really like the lead in it. And
Right.
how do you achieve that kind of lead? I mean, I tried it. I can make really big leads. I make a lead like Headhunters. I make a lead like Wild Style. But that lead, that kind of, I really don't.
Well, the screech or the lead or which particular element?
When the main melody comes in.
Okay, the do. Yeah, okay.
That one.
Okay, the lead sound itself comes from the Virus Power Core. I use that quite a bit because I find it gives me a really big sound right away. Not that it's too different from the C or the TI. It's just it's a virus, and they're actually all digital synths. There's no analog processing going in them whatsoever. So, yeah. So I use that. I use a kind of like square wave with some pulse width modulation just to get a little bit different. A bit of distortion and a bit of reverb. There was nothing really that special about it. And I actually think that the mix for that particular track is really terrible. And yeah, no, I don't like it. I really, really don't like it. I'm more impressed. No, honestly, I'm more impressed with the mixes that I've done for my newer tracks. So like, oh my God, Aliens and Helix and stuff like that. The mixes for those I feel a lot more refined, whereas that one's kind of like what I was talking about before. Loads of reverb everywhere. Bad, I didn't like it. And that's why it sounds so big. I think, you know, for some people, they've kind of listened to it and they're like, whoa, it sounds huge. For me, it sounds muddy and a terrible mess. And part of that actually was because I was, you know, working in a bedroom where I couldn't hear everything properly, and it's just like not proper, you know, acoustic treatment and stuff like that. So I had to compensate to make it sound even bigger in amongst all the room reverb that I was hearing. And so, yeah, that's the way it sounds, why it does. But the lead itself is, you know, square wave with a little bit of distortion after some filtering, and pulse width modulation and reverb. I think it's a Lexicon PCM Hall reverb as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Is it really that simple?
Well, for me it was, but it doesn't need to be complicated. Why does music need to be complicated? If you can do things really simply and pull a good sound, great.
Last time I tried to copy, reverse engineer the lead, I had like 8 layers or something.
Oh, I think that lead itself has 3 layers. One is the main square character lead. The other one is another virus power core with a lot of unison. I think it's just saw waves, 8 voices like this, and then another layer is the virus TI. So with the hyperstore thing. So it's 3 layers. It's not complicated, but it's also the selection that I use to get the bigness that I think makes it difficult.
Okay, thanks.
Cool. No worries. Go for it.
So in my studio, I have a pretty good sound system.
Right.
And then you have all those things you want to add and stuff. And then you go to a club where you play it, and then you don't hear shit. Everything falls out because the speakers in clubs are mostly horrible.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that?
By working with that in mind, okay, that most clubs, and I'm not talking festivals, I'm talking clubs, most clubs have a subpar sound system. And the lowest they can go is about 50 hertz, and you don't even really feel it. The roll-off is a little bit beforehand. What that means in a musical sense is kicks in F, maybe kind of sometimes work. Kicks in E, forget about it, there's going to be no bass. Kicks in F sharp, kind of cool. So with that in mind, I try and work with those limitations. Right, okay, the club system is going to be a bit like this. The other thing is, when you're thinking about those club systems, things need to be obvious. So if you've got a lot of little details in a track, and you want people to hear those details, it's not going to be subtle, otherwise it gets lost. You know, you need to really bring it out. Subtlety is kind of lost on those club systems. There's no point. You could have something with all these little intricate elements and everything, but if it gets lost, you know, it will get lost.
Yeah, but you don't make a different version for the club?
No. No, I never do.
Yeah. Okay.
No. I don't think it's necessary. A good mix actually will translate. That's the definition of a good mix, will literally translate to many different sources. So you could play it on your laptop, play it on your phone, play it in a club, play it at a huge festival, and it'll still sound awesome. And that's part of getting a good, punchy, clean mix down.
Thanks.
It's hard. It's really hard. And it's a skill that you develop after a lot of mixes and a lot of failures. Like I said before, I started making music in 1999, and I feel that only in the last year, my mixes are okay. It takes time. And there's nothing wrong with that. It takes time. Sure. I think you had a question.
Do you have any tips or tricks on how to make a huge screech?
Reverb will help. Reverb just makes everything sound huge. The other thing is lots of detuning, so lots of things to fill up the frequency spectrum will help. I'm just trying to think of a really ridiculous screech that I've made. You could try just like, a lot of unison, a lot of chorus, and then distort it. That's something that I do quite a bit actually, to get a really like aggressive, fat, wide screech. lot of unison to make it detuned and out there in the stereo field, and distorting it so it's really aggressive. It brings out those characteristics, and even a little bit of a short reverb before distortion, so it gets even more messy and horrible. And then you put a really clean reverb after it. You get this ridiculous thing that is bigger than me. Sure.
And which kind of filter you're using on that screech? Like in the remix on the Hardbit Style from Headhunters?
Yeah.
You can hear it goes a little bit up and down.
You mean like a bandpass filter to give it a little bit of movement? Okay. Yeah. Things like that. Something I do quite a bit actually to get more movement in music. I mean, briefly I talked about before creating character, identity, and movement in your stuff. Is automating or using an LFO on a filter. And what I use actually is just camel fat. The BP2 fat filter, I think it is. Turn up the resonance, it starts distorting within itself. Maybe put another bit of distortion afterwards, so it's like even ridiculous. And then, yeah, you can automate that using an internal LFO. That's one way to do things. You can do that with other synths as well internally. You could do something like that within Serum. I've been using Serum quite a bit. Just pop an LFO on a filter and distortion, compression.
And if you're using Virus TI?
I love my Virus TI. Dude, I'd marry it if I could. That might be legal somewhere. If someone can tell me where that is, legal to do that, I'm going to do it. But I love my Virus TI. It's really, really cool to do just really fat sounds quickly and at the cost of no CPU. And one of the reasons why I'll use a certain selection of plugins is because I know that they will give me the sounds that I want quickly. I think it's really important to be in the flow and do stuff of what you want really quick. So I'll use the Virus TI quite a bit, the Power Core as well, the Virus Power Core, which is kind of like a Virus B. It doesn't have any of the hypersaws, doesn't have any of the EQs that the Virus has, the Virus TI has. I'll use those quite a bit. And to get a really big screech, here's a really quick recipe actually. Hypersaws on both, detune them quite a bit, put the max amount of waves that you can do, maybe set the detune of those internal oscillators to 116, maybe bring in the other third oscillator, take it an octave up, and use a saw wave, go to the LFO page, turn up the LFOs to as quick as they possibly can, and then start introducing them to affect the oscillators a little bit, then distortion, and then add your unison, add 4, 6, 8, and you get this ridiculously huge sound. Then when you've got this big, horrible, massive thing, then you can automate it with a pitch envelope, and you'll get this crazy, crazy screech.
Thank you.
No problem. Another gentleman with a cap. People with caps, rock on. I should get one.
I heard you talking about drum and bass.
Yes.
What's your thing with drum and bass?
I love drum and bass for a couple of reasons. First off, it's fast. I love fast music. It's really energetic. And the other thing is that drum and bass is a genre that's been around since the 90s, actually. And they've experimented with lots of different styles, elements, and gone in different ways as well. You see, most genres actually go through the same problems of in my opinion, what's happening to hardstyle right now. So we had really commercial stuff and then really underground stuff, and people are losing where it's going. People are not sure if they feel it anymore because they're missing something, or some people only like the hard stuff, or some people only like the radio stuff, but the radio stuff's too commercial. Drum and bass did that 15 years ago. So I like to listen to that music because, first off, it's energetic, and also it's really insightful because they've experienced stuff that we're going through now. So there's lessons to learn. There's always lessons to learn in other genres of music if you really want to go through and read biographies, interviews, and all that sort of thing. But I like it essentially because it's fast, crazy music, and that kind of fits me.
Yeah, that's the same reason for me.
Nice. Any other questions? Gentleman without a cap. Let's see. Let's see if we can pass the mic over to him.
I was wondering if there are currently any artists outside the genre that have recently or are currently inspiring you, like perhaps in drum and bass or
Spore,
neurofunk?
actually.
Spore.
Yeah, I've been listening. Spore, I don't know if you know an electro or house artist called Feed Me, but basically Spore was Feed Me or Feed Me with Spore, or one of the, I know, but like, he kind of changed faces, kind of like, yeah, screw drum and bass, I'm going to do, electro house now, and then he's kind of like, you know what, I'm kind of done with electro house, let's do drum and bass again. So he kind of floated in between the two. He's got some really cool cutting edge sounds that I like, and I'm always looking for new things on what people do, the way that he's kind of arranged stuff, and his sound design is, dude, just crazy. I love Noisier as well, once again for the same reasons, because Noisier, really, really awesome Dutch drum and bass trio that have some crazy, crazy sound design, and an even crazier studio. If you go to their Facebook, you see this construction of 3 different shells that it took them like a year in this gigantic warehouse, and they've concrete this and layered that and blah, 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 blah. Crazy, crazy studio. And I find that inspiring because I'm always looking for new influences and new things to put into my own music, for my own music to have more character and to stand out. I'm always looking for things like that. But those two at the moment are what I'm listening to. That was different 2 weeks ago, though. 2 weeks ago, I was listening to Abstract and Deep House and kind of things. So I'm trying to figure out, okay, so what makes this music popular? What makes it this thing? And where are the things in this genre that I can like? And then before that, it was I was listening to like a lot of early rave, like a lot of really cheesy early rave. So I'm always looking for new things and different things. But yeah, to answer your question, Spore and Noisier are what I'm feeling today. Tomorrow might be different.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Anyone else? I'll get you. Yeah.
When mixing down your track, is there a particular setting you use for your master channel, for example, maybe to leave room for mastering or?
No, I do have a couple of rules actually. First one is the kick drum maxes out at -9 on the Cubase mixer, so that gives me plenty of headroom for everything else. I think when it comes to sending stuff over to a master, some people say, yeah, keep it at -6 dB, but it's digital audio, man. Difference when you're working on on a console and you're slamming a master bus compressor on like a big SSL, that's going to be different. But today's music, it's not quite the same. I do have a multi-band compressor that I use on the master bus just to glue things a little bit better and to prevent clipping. But the only hard and fast rule that I have is my kick drum is at -9, so I've got headroom that stuff doesn't clip when I'm mixing down. The other thing that I do when I'm mixing down is also once I finish the track and I've left it for a few days. So, and then I go down to mix, bring all the faders down. Forget what I did beforehand by way of mixing so that I can come at it with a fresh perspective and see where everything needs to go. And the other thing as well is mix really quietly. I make music really loud, but I actually mix down really quietly because you want to be able to identify all the elements. Because when music is loud, everything is awesome. It really is. That's why we go to parties, because music is loud and it feels awesome. But when you're mixing down, you need to be more clinical. You need to be more critical. You need to be really, really specific and be able to say, right, well, I need to balance things like this. And I mix it as, when I'm mixing, I keep the volume as quiet as I possibly can, so that way all the elements find balance.
Hey, thanks.
No problem. Anyone else? Oh yeah, sorry.
How is your collab with Tierra?
It's taking its sweet time, and I think probably it won't happen. For the reason being is that I try and make music in the flow, in inspiration. I don't force things because I think it's really important. Some people are really good at getting into the studio, and this is what I'm doing today, and I'm only going to do this, and this is whatever comes out, whatever comes out. I'm not one of those people. I float around and do different things and whatever. One day I'll be halfway through working on a track. The track probably needs an intro and an outro. I'm like, yeah, I'm bored of this. I'm going to go do something else. So because of that, and like I was saying before to the gentleman in the glasses, it becomes very difficult to work with somebody because they have different expectations and different ways of working compared to me. And so when it comes to that particular collaboration, I don't have the feeling for it anymore, and it's just one of those things that just kind of gets shelved. Maybe it'll happen later on, but yeah, that's how it goes.
Thank you.
No problem. Anyone else? Can you pass it over? Yeah.
Okay. What was your inspiration for Oh My God Aliens?
Ah.
I'm very curious.
That's probably one of the more favorite tracks that I've done recently. For those that don't know, I've done a track called Oh My God Aliens with a ridiculous kick and a stupid sample. No, it's kind of, basically it happened like this. I was walking the dog one day and I had this idea of like, hey, what would happen is instead of me sampling a horror film, which is what a lot of people in raw style do, it's kind of done. What if somebody took the idea of a movie thing, but instead of being like really serious and dark, did it something really comedic and funny? And I love Futurama, so I was watching some stuff from Futurama. There's a particular scene, actually, when in the first episode, where aliens come and destroy the civilization, and I thought, oh, hang on, what if we haven't had funny tracks for a while? Why don't we do why can't I do a funny track, but that feels serious? Instead of it being really jokey and circus-like, why can't we marry really rough elements and a serious feel of the track with a actually really funny vocal? So yeah, I was walking the dog, I'm like, oh yeah, oh my God, aliens. Let's write that down. And I started looking for samples. I went through something like 10 or 15 different like B movies, like, oh dude, and really terrible films. It was so bad. From like the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, in search of a sample. I couldn't find exactly what I wanted, so I contacted a voiceover person who really nailed it the first take, and I was like, dude, this is gonna be a hilarious track. And then, yeah, I kind of went from there. I put some, I tried to get this alien invasion feeling in it as well, with the funny little drums and everything, and the strings, actually, and the trombones and stuff. But yeah, it came from that, walking the dog, letting things sink in, absorbing everything that I talked about beforehand, actually, in terms of the creative process, was part of that process. And then after that, I was like, all right, cool, well, I've got a kick here, and I'll put that there, and I love these trombones, I'm gonna put the trombones there, and I'll put the marching snares over there, and then I'll put a big fat lead, I'll put some crazy screeches, and then let's make it sound like an alien invasion. That's how it goes.
Thank you very much.
No problem. Any other questions? Okay. See if we can. Cool.
Do you have tips for taking some samples from movies? How do you do this?
Look at people. Do you mean like technically taking them from the movies?
Yeah, like I'm seeing like a fun lyric,
Yeah.
line from a movie, and how do you get that part to your DAW?
Okay, there's a free little app for Mac, and I'm sure it exists on PC. It's called All2MP3. So I download the movie I want, stick it in All2MP3, out pops out an MP3, and then I take it from there.
All to my MP3?
All2MP3. So it doesn't really matter because then I distort it, bit crush it, or whatever, and it doesn't really matter too much. It doesn't need to be the cleanest of the clean. In fact, I think what's actually really cool when sampling a movie or a TV show or something, if you can't get it clean, cool, make it dirtier. Enhance the rawness of it, enhance the grit, because that way it gives it more character. So, yeah. Not everything needs to be super perfect, 48K, 28, 24-bit, blah, 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 blah. No, I don't know, I'll sample MP3s all the time. Go for it, why not?
Yeah, I just wanted to know how do you take a sample from a movie.
Yeah, no, cool. Awesome. Anyone else? Another gentleman in the cap, you're killing it today.
How you to make sound like a gated kick in your track like Riot?
For me, it's not a gated kick. It's a big... Actually, the kick in Riot is inspired from an old hardcore track. I don't know if you remember one of Angafist's early aliases called Menace to Society. He did a track called Chronic Disorder. Incredible hardcore track, incredible. Actually quite innovative at the time because a lot of the hardcore around then was actually much faster. And this is quite a slow track. I listened to that track and I listened to some other rawer hardstyle at the time, and I was like, they seem kind of connected. I feel like I can do a hardcore kick in that style. So what I did was, first thing was focusing on making a kick that sounded like a hardcore kick. Huge boost around from memory, it's like 500 or 550 hertz when I was distorting it. You know, when you're distorting a kick drum, you'll resonate, you'll peak certain frequencies, so those things stand out. I was focusing on those ones. And then I used a lot of reverb. I'm trying to remember which reverb I used. I think it was the Logic Platinum Verb. It was just, when I make kicks, I do everything in Logic, no other external plugins. So.
Get a kick is a lots of flanger, or not?
No, I don't know. I think everyone has their own particular approach to it. If you're thinking about like the old Italian techno style gated kicks, what they did was just reverb, actually.
Yeah.
So as for a flanger or whatever, it's not really necessary in the process. I think for that big kind of sound, that's very much a gated reverb. And you can do that with kind of anything.
What do you like the kicks of Digital Minds and Real?
Not particularly my flavor, but it changes all the time. Like what I'm feeling at the moment are more techie kicks. Actually, I made this really interesting kick the other day by taking a reverse bass that I'd made, and then stretching it out, and then taking out the flat, boring part and keeping the character, so it sounds like a big hang, that kind of a thing. Sounds really odd, but it sounded really cool. So I've been focusing more on that particular sound, and like I said before, I'm looking for music that makes me go wow, and when I make music, I want something that makes me go, oh wow, that's kind of cool. Not necessarily the hardest or the darkest. So.
All right,
cool.
Thanks.
No problem. Any other questions? Oh wow, they pop up last moment. Yeah.
So when making a kick in a kick project or something and bouncing it, is there any limitations about the volume on that, or what should the volume be while bouncing it?
The only thing I have is...
Because sometimes you see them clipping, but it's not really clear to me how much amount of clip is allowed.
I guess it depends where it is clipping. Like if it's clipping on the master output and stuff, and it sounds bad, damn. If it sounds okay, screw it, bounce it down. And if it looks like a big square wave and it sounds good, go for it, man. Don't worry about it.
And your bus channel is set on 0 dB?
Yeah, but I don't necessarily work that way when I'm assembling a kick drum, though.
Okay.
Sure. Now, what I end up doing actually is like I'll put in a lot of space, and I'll try and make the punch like really, like a lot bigger than, I can only describe it like this, like using kind of fish shapes. That's kind of what I go for. I don't really have a limitation on whether it should be this loud or that loud, or maybe I should keep, all my kick files at -3 dB or whatever. No, that's not the case.
As long as it sounds good, then the clip is allowed.
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Final question.
Hi. Have you got any with melodies? What do you do? Do you just randomly do stuff, or do you? Have you got like some musical theory behind that?
I don't have any theory behind what I'm doing except for I'm playing the keys and I get what sounds good to me. That's the only thing that I really focus on. But I think if you want to have good melodies, I think it's also very, very important to get some musical theory behind you, just like to understand, harmony, dissonance, counterpoint, and all that sort of thing. There's no real formula of how I do things. Sometimes what sounds good one day, I'll hate the next. And often when it comes for me to write a melody, I'll go through 3, 4, 5, sometimes 10 different melodies in different chord progressions. And then I pick the one that resonates with me the most. There's no real set formula, unfortunately. But yeah. Well, cool. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. Hope you enjoyed your time at Dancefair. Hope you learned something. See you guys later.